Though war had long been expected, the fall of Fort Sumter in April 1861 made it a reality. There would be no turning back. On the advice of General-in-Chief Winfield Scott, President Lincoln proposed a plan to cut off southern ports by sea, seize control of interior rivers, and capture major cities. Lincoln signed a proclamation laying out the blueprint for the naval war. Dubbed the Anaconda Plan, the strategy called for Navy ships to blockade every southern port along 3,000 miles of coastline from Virginia to Texas. The objective was to prevent the Confederacy from exporting its cotton to European buyers in exchange for hard currency, and to keep vital supplies such as weapons and blankets from getting in. Blockading this much territory with such a few ships seemed an almost impossible task. This mission impossible fell to the Blockade Strategy Board, also known as the Commission on Conference and the DuPont Board, named for its leader, Captain Samuel Francis DuPont. Besides DuPont, the other members included Commander Charles Henry Davis, Major John Gross Bernard of the U.S. Army, and Alexander D. Bache of the U.S. Coast Survey. The Navy's few ships were augmented by the fast vessels of the U.S. Revenue Cutter Service, the forerunner of the U.S. Coast Guard. The Revenue Cutter Service was ideally suited to this task since one of its principal missions since its founding in 1790 was to stop smugglers. These ships proved particularly adept at intercepting Southern blockade runners. Ultimately, the board's blockade strategy was made possible by the power of steam. Steam allowed ships to move faster, not limited by the wind. The newer ships in the fleet were already steam-powered, and their numbers were rapidly increased in the frenzy of shipbuilding that followed. It was this that enabled the U.S. Navy to post a cordon of pickets at the mouth of every harbor, river, and inlet from Chesapeake Bay to Mexico. With this control of the sea, the commercial operations of all Confederate ports were, for the most part, brought to an end. Steam also helped the Union Navy take control of the barrier islands off the Carolinas and strategic Port Royal. Steam power allowed the Navy ships to remain in constant motion, greatly reducing the effectiveness of Confederate shore batteries. Besides blockading the coast, the Navy was ordered to capture the ports along the Mississippi River, cutting off that vital lifeline. While the Army appeared more focused on the Tennessee River, Assistant Navy Secretary Gustavus V. Fox set his sights on the capture of New Orleans. The fall of New Orleans, he believed, would result in the eventual surrender of all of the other towns along the Mississippi. In a daring move, Flag Officer, soon-to-be Admiral David Farragut, ran his fleet past the forts defending the city. When Farragut's ships arrived at New Orleans, the city surrendered without resistance. The siege at Vicksburg in June 1863 was much more difficult. General Ulysses S. Grant was dug in around the heavily fortified city. Navy ships shelled the city and controlled the Mississippi up and down river. In August 1864, Farragut's forces captured Mobile Bay, and in January 1865, a joint U.S. Army-Navy assault took Fort Fisher, which guarded the approaches to Wilmington. With this victory, the U.S. Navy had fulfilled its mission. While Union and Confederate armies slugged it out across battlefields from Virginia to Mississippi, the U.S. Navy had slowly tightened the noose around the Confederacy. Vicksburg and Port Hudson surrendered as much to Farragut and Porter as to Grant. Sherman's march to the sea was possible in many respects because the Navy held Port Royal. In McClellan's march on Richmond, it was the Navy's guns that provided critical cover. In the final analysis, the effectiveness of the Navy's 4-year blockade of southern ports, more than a single battle or engagement, proved to be a determining factor in the downfall of the Confederacy. It also provided a beacon of hope to an enslaved population on land.